There are rumblings that the Baylor Bears have the best backcourt in the Big 12. This is Locked On Baylor Postgame.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another episode of the Locked On Baylor Postgame. I am your host, Ham Stewart. Thank you so much for joining me late on a weeknight, y'all. I'm going to have to keep this one short because I do have to record tomorrow's episode as well. So thank you for joining us in this one. A 79-73 win for the Bears over Texas Tech here at the Foster Pavilion. That's 3 on the bounce for the Baylor Bears. And they are now tied for first place in the Big 12, tied in the loss column, if I'm not mistaken, with the Houston Cougars, who are 7-3, Baylor 6-3. Good night all the way around. It got kind of hairy a little bit in the last 2 minutes there. Baylor, I didn't think finished the game that great in the last 2 minutes, but if you look back at like the last 5 or 6 minutes, they did finish the game really well. At one point with like 5 minutes left, they were up 15 points, which in the Big 12, that against a ranked Big 12 team, that's pretty good. I mean, 6 points, it wasn't quite that close. Baylor really, I thought, dominated portions of the second half. And I will say this about Tech, they were definitely shorthanded without 2 starters out there tonight, and the flu going around the team. So, there's a couple guys out there that aren't playing at 100%. That's a good basketball team. I mean, I was talking about this a week ago. I know it changes week to week, but to me, it was a week ago. It was Houston and then Tech and then probably Kansas. Like that's how good. And then Iowa State right there too. Like that's how good I think this team is when they are 100%. And the bad news for the rest of the Big 12 is they're not a finished product yet under Grant McCasland's. So that's my respect minute for Tech, but a good win tonight for Baylor. Again, 6 points is like 15 points in a lot of other leagues, 6 points in the Big 12. 3 guys going over 15 points, which has Baylor done that in a conference game this year? Like that's, oh no, sorry. Jaden Nunn finished with 14. Whoops. I got to change the description in the YouTube video, but Jaden Nunn with 14, Ray J. Dennis with 21, Yves Missi with 17. I'm going to talk about the guards here in a minute, but Yves Missi, man, I had this moment yet again in the second half where I just said, Yves Missi is one of the 3 or 4 best players in the Big 12. I really believe that. I think he's an All-American. Like you're not necessarily going to see it from looking at the numbers, but when you watch the game, it's incredible how much impact he has on the game from the center position, which is just not what it used to be in any level of basketball. Not just the NBA, but absolutely you see that in college basketball too. The center is just not what it used to be. And he is redefining that. Now there are also some other great centers in America, so that makes it tough for the All-American team like Zach Edey and Hunter Dickinson for sure. But he just affects the game so much on both ends of the court. He had a sequence where I think he blocked a shot and then altered another one on the same possession, and then came down and had a dunk or a layup in there, and it was all in the span of about 15 seconds. And we see that every night from him. We see that. He is so good, man. And we talk about how Scott Drew has never had a player like him. True, but and it's not just him being a unicorn, like he's performing too. Like there are some times where guys are just freaks of nature and they're okay, or they'll have off nights. Yves Missi does not have off nights. Like it's truly incredible. And of course, the next flowers that I need to give are to the Baylor backcourt. I mentioned it in the cold open there, but Jaden Nunn and Ray J. Dennis have just taken it to another level here during this 3-game winning streak. And of course, there will be other losses to come during this season, but I think this backcourt has turned a corner. I really do. And Ray J did it with the points tonight with 21 points, and was pretty good from the free throw line, 9 of 12. Jaden Nunn the confidence is through the roof. And I said that in the first half as kind of a bit. Oh, well, he's confident because he was missing a lot of shots in the first half. Second half, not as much the case. He finishes with 14 and 5 rebounds as well. That shows me he's not afraid to get in those grimy areas on both ends. And that's something Scott Drew talked about yesterday in his media availability. He said, when we saw Jaden in the preseason and we saw the toughness and aggression he plays with, and we said that guy's Big 12. He's Big 12. And he showed again tonight. He is Big 12. And when you talk about him and Ray J. Dennis and Langston Love, who, by the way, Scott said he's not worried about. He said that in the postgame. It was right after the game, so obviously he didn't really get a second look at it, but Langston Love did limp off the court with a couple minutes left. He really had trouble putting weight on one of his legs, went right down the tunnel. Anyway, those three guys, Love, Dennis, and Nunn, they can all get to the rim at will. And that is a scary good thing for Baylor. Because I talked about the versatility of this offense. They at times can be a great three-point shooting team, although they were poor from that tonight, 28%. And they have a legit offensive weapon in the middle in Yves Missi, but that changes everything when you have three guys that can get to the basket. And it was a little shaky in the early part of the season, but they're finishing layups and they're getting to the free throw line, and their free throw shooting is improving. So that just says to me, what kind of defense do you play against them? Like when Ray J's get down in his bag, there was a couple of times tonight, and we're starting to see this more and more and more, where I see the Kyrie Irving effect in him, where he's got the ball on the wing or almost on the low post, and he's a guard, and you're a point guard, and you're saying, this ball ain't going anywhere else. He is just sizing them up. He's just got these defenders on strings, and he's going to get to the basket. He's going to score. Like there's not many guards you can say that about in this league, which is a good guard league, by the way. So fantastic night, I thought, from both your starting guards with Ray J. Dennis and Jaden Nunn. One thing that's kind of on the negative side is another tough game for Jacobe Walter. 8 points, 2 of 9 shooting, 1 of 5 from 3. That's really been the thing. Excuse me. It is. Sorry about that. That's really been the thing, is just the inefficiency shooting, because Jacobe Walter is a good shooter, but we're talking about 4 or 5 games in a row where he just hasn't really shot the ball well at all. And he still does a lot of other things well. I think his defense is improving. He's flying all over the place. But tonight, you look at it with the 8 points and the 2 of 9 from the floor, he also only has 2 rebounds and 2 assists. And I see all these other guards that can get to the basket, and I think, why can't Jacobe do that? Like I know he can do that. Why isn't that number being called? Why aren't there times where Jacobe Walter is just putting his head down and getting to the basket? We see that at times where he'll get to the free throw line. We didn't really see it tonight. There was a drive he had in the first half where he was going in looking for contact and threw the ball up, didn't get the foul call, and I think he shied away from going to the basket after that. So it's got to be a bit of a confidence thing. He's kept the right attitude about it. If I were in the press conference tonight, I would have loved to ask Scott that, just, a kid who has the talent there, but he's a young player and it's not going for him right now. What do you tell him? I just hope that this isn't a prolonged thing and it becomes kind of like what Kendall Brown was for you a couple of years ago, where he just never really regained his confidence, never really turned back around once the conference season started, declared for the draft, and his draft stock had plummeted from when he first came on campus. I don't think that's going to happen, but I just hope that he has a good shooting game soon, because that would be a huge lift for the Bears as well. So that's talking about the Baylor guards. I will talk about one Tech guard here, Pop Isaacs. You might remember him as the guy who was being booed every time he touched the ball. Good job on that, I'll say. That was good. That was an elite atmosphere. He doesn't have a great game, 11 points, 4 of 12 from the floor, 5 assists, though, 4 turnovers to go with it. There was a lot of chanting around Pop Isaacs, who, look, I don't know a ton about the story, but he has been accused of sexual assault by a 17-year-old in the Bahamas, I believe, and he heard about it all night. And this is obviously not the first time he's heard it. I know I have heard from Tech fans before this game that it was pretty nasty up at TCU, which doesn't surprise me too much. But a lot of chants, including a very loud one of 17, 17, and no means no, no means no. The irony is not lost on me that it's a Baylor crowd chanting no means no. I didn't personally partake in the chants tonight, not trying to take the high road on this or anything, but just coming from me personally, I just remembered the feeling of 2016 and 2017, where no matter what the sport was, everywhere you heard those kinds of chants against Baylor, a lot of no means no. And it sucked, man. And I know this is a very different situation with Baylor. It was a whole team. It was a systemic school problem. And it felt weird when you were chanting it against the basketball team when it was the football team that was going through it. And this is obviously more direct. Like, this is the guy who's being accused right out there playing. But I just didn't love it, because it took me back to those days. And I realized a lot of those students that are down there were in middle school, but it wasn't that long ago that was happening to us. Now, what I will also say is fair game. It's fair game to do that. And I'm sure Pop would tell you that too. McCasland will tell you that. I haven't heard what he said in the postgame presser, but it might not always be fair for the kid, because he's a kid, but he's playing major college basketball, and this is a looming lawsuit over him. I think that is not unfair to chant that at him. And it's just not something that I was going to partake in. And it wasn't being chanted in my section either, because I think a lot of us who weren't students or aren't students now remember what it was like just not all that long ago. So booing him every time he touched the ball, I mean, sure, yeah, I'll take that all the time. And it was consistent, and it was good with that. And I will say, one of the teams that was very much into the no means no chant when it was against Baylor was Texas Tech. So just be with that. And in fact, I heard some Tech fans around me who said they were like, they were critiquing the chants and saying, all I can say is, if y'all come out to Lubbock, we can't promise your protection. And I'm like, oh, okay. So these kids chant 17, and you're like, if you come to attend a basketball game in our arena, you can get hurt. I don't know. It just seemed like a weird counterpoint to me. So again, it's like, you can absolutely do that. I mean, it's fair game as long as it's not racist or sexist. Pretty much anything's fair game if you're in the public eye and you're in a road basketball arena. So it just really wasn't for me. I don't want to sound like I'm taking a moral high ground here. It just wasn't for me as someone who went through that very minorly as a Baylor fan, not really going through that years and years ago. So anyway, all in all, a good win tonight. I think Baylor did really well statistically in the things I thought they were going to do well in. Obviously, we heard right before the game that Warren Washington was officially out. There was speculation of that. And so they didn't have a guy in their starting lineup over 6'7". They had, what was his name? 23. I can't say Yalaho or someone that like no one knew who he was. So he's not getting a lot of minutes this year. So they really had to dig down deep in the bench. And so because of that, Baylor +9 in rebounds, and honestly could have and probably should have been more. Second chance points, very interesting tonight. Baylor tripled up Texas Tech 6-2. They won the turnover battle and points off of turnovers as well. Nothing too glaring there. And the points in the paint was the biggest advantage to Baylor, +16. And a lot of that came from the guards tonight, not just Missi. So the other thing was I thought they made a good adjustment in the second half. You didn't see a lot of zone. I've mentioned really the last couple of weeks that I think this team can switch between man and zone pretty effortlessly and still get a lot of the same results, which is really dangerous in a good way for Baylor going down the stretch. And they played a lot of zone in the first half, and the Tech had a good offense for it, especially for when they didn't have scoring big men. They found the holes in the defense pretty easily, and that's the thing that I think kept them in the game in the first half and down just one. So they switched to the man-to-man, which I think worked better because Tech is not a bad shooting team either, and that worked in the second half. Baylor's deeper in this game. They wore Tech down. Tech didn't have the ammo in the magazine, I guess, so to speak. So going into Kansas, we'll obviously talk a lot about that towards the end of this week. It's a tall task. Kansas has an extra day of rest, and they're coming off a loss, and they're playing at Fog Allen with College game day in the house. So for as much as we complained about the officiating in the Iowa State game, I imagine you probably will not be too happy with the officials on Saturday, which, by the way, well officiated game tonight, really well officiated game. And if anything, I think there were some legitimate gripes from Tech fans in the first half, but I thought that wore out pretty quickly. I thought they let them play physical, but they set a standard. It was not inconsistent. So really good jobs by the officials tonight. Maybe it's just because I was looking out for it, but I think it was one of the best ref games that Baylor has had in the conference season. So anyway, that's pretty much going to wrap it up here for the post game. I got to record tomorrow's show, which will obviously talk a lot more about this game. Anyway, be sure to tap down in the comments what you thought about this game, if this was as impressive as I'm making it out to be, or more impressive than 6 points might show you. We'll definitely read the room here on the comments and bring that into tomorrow's show, because I got to go here real quick. So thank you guys for tuning in. We will have more tomorrow on Locked on Baylor.